Evergreen High School, an ordinary institution of learning by day, but as night falls, it becomes a classroom for a different kind of lesson. Our subject tonight is Jake Simmons, a former bully about to face the final exam in the shadows of guilt.
The letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday, the handwriting on the envelope so familiar yet distorted, like a memory twisted by time. It had been years since I'd heard from Mike. As I stood there, water dripping from my coat onto the kitchen floor, I couldn't shake the feeling that opening this letter would change everything. My name is Jake Simmons, and this is the story of how the shadows of our past can reach out and drag us back into the darkness we thought we'd left behind. Mike and I went to Evergreen High together, but we weren't friends back then. The truth is, I was one of his tormentors. Mike was the quiet kid, always hunched over a sketchbook, an easy target for guys like me who mistook cruelty for coolness. I remember one day, sophomore year, when we took things too far. We cornered Mike in the locker room after gym class. The fear in his eyes as we approached still haunts me. We took his sketchbook, tore out the pages, laughed as he scrambled to collect the shreds of his art from the wet floor. When he started crying, we only laughed harder. I'll spare you the more violent details. Use your imagination. God, we were monsters. After graduation, most of us moved away, eager to escape our small town. But Mike, he stayed, became the school janitor. I guess some part of him never left those halls, never escaped the torment we put him through. It wasn't until 5 years ago that I started hearing strange rumors about Evergreen High from my little sister Abby, who was a student there. "Jake," she said during one of our weekly calls, her voice hushed and worried. "There's something wrong with the new janitor. He's always muttering to himself, and sometimes he just stops and stares at nothing for minutes. It's creeping everyone out." I knew immediately it had to be Mike. A pang of guilt hit me, but I brushed it off. Told Abby he was probably just a little eccentric, that she shouldn't worry. But then the incident started. It began with small things. Students complaining about missing items, a lucky pen, a charm bracelet, little stuff. But then it escalated, and fast. Abby called me late one night, her voice shaking. "Emma Chen collapsed during volleyball practice today," she said. She was screaming about this horrible pain in her stomach. They rushed her to the hospital, but the doctors couldn't find anything wrong. A week later, it was Jason Myers, star quarterback, all-around golden boy. He swore up and down that someone had pushed him down the stairs, broke his arm in 3 places. Because of the severity of his injuries and his insistence that he was pushed, the school administration called the police. 2 officers spent over 30 minutes reviewing the security footage. When they emerged from the security office, their faces were pale. "It appears he was pushed from behind," one officer said, his voice tight. When pressed about who had pushed Jason, the officer's partner just shook his head. "No one visible," he muttered, refusing to elaborate further. Both officers requested copies of the footage for further investigation, but we never heard from them again. And through it all, there was Mike, always in the background, mop in hand, watching. But here's where things get truly unsettling. Abby started noticing something strange about Mike. She swore he was talking to thin air, acting as if someone was there when the hallways were empty. Abby told me, and she was noticeably frightened. "It's like he's following someone around. He'll walk into empty classrooms, talking and gesturing. But Jake, I'm telling you, there's never anyone there with him. And the way he looks during these interactions, it's like he's terrified. His eyes are wide, he's sweating, and his hands shake. It's as if he's being forced to follow something he's scared to death of." She paused, and I could hear her take a shaky breath. "But the creepiest thing happened last week. I had to use the bathroom during Mr. Peterson's history class. You know how strict he is about hall passes. The corridors were completely empty and silent, that weird kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. That's when I saw Mike walking towards the girls' bathroom. Just as he got close, the door opened on its own, like someone invisible walked in. And then Mike, he just followed right in after, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. It was like he was escorting someone, but there was nobody there." Abby's voice dropped even lower. "And Jake, once, just once, I could have sworn I heard a girl's voice answer him. It was faint, like a whisper on the wind, but I heard it. It said, 'They'll pay.'" Mike went pale as a sheet when he heard it. I've never been so scared in my life. "What do you think he sees?" I asked, a chill running down my spine. Abby hesitated. "I don't know for sure, but the way he acts, the way he talks, it's like he's interacting with a girl, someone our age, but she's invisible to everyone else. And Jake, I think she might be dangerous. And I think Mike knows it too, but he can't escape her. I tried to rationalize it. Told her Mike was probably just dealing with some issues, that trauma does things to people. But deep down, a cold fear was taking root. Because I knew what we'd done to Mike. I knew the pain we'd caused. Oh, and Jake, Abby added, almost as an afterthought. You know that light blue scarf Grandma knitted for me last Christmas? The one I wear so often? I must have left it at your place last week when you had me over for dinner. I can't find it. I'll come over and pick it up when I can. Then came the night that changed everything. Abby had stayed late at school, working on a project for her art class. As she was leaving, she saw Mike in an empty classroom. He was hunched over something, muttering. Curiosity got the better of her, and she crept closer to the door. Jake, she said when she called me that night, her voice trembling. He had a doll. This crude little thing made of fabric scraps and, I think it was hair. And wrapped around its arm was Emma's missing charm bracelet. My blood ran cold as she continued. As I watched, he took out this long needle, and he pushed it slowly into the doll's stomach. The whole time he was talking to someone, but there was no one else there. Just him and that doll. The next day, Emma was back in the hospital. Internal bleeding. No obvious cause. I should have done something then. Should have gone back, talked to Mike, tried to make amends for our past. But I was a coward. Told myself it wasn't my problem anymore. Months passed. The incidents at the school continued. Students getting hurt in strange accidents, always preceded by something of theirs going missing. And always, Mike was there in the background. I started having nightmares. Dreams where I was back in high school, wandering dark hallways that seemed to stretch on forever. And at the end of every corridor, I'd see her. The girl Abby had described. Long dark hair, pale skin, wearing a white dress that seemed to float around her. She never spoke, never moved, just watched me with eyes that seemed to hold all the pain and anger we'd inflicted on Mike. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the echo of Mike's sobs from that day in the locker room ringing in my ears. It wasn't until last month that I learned the full story. That's when I got the letter. A letter from Mike. Jake, it began. I'm writing this from the Pinewood Psychiatric Facility. I don't expect you to believe me, but I need someone to know the truth. What followed was a confession that chilled me to my core. Mike wrote about the girl he called X, how he started seeing her a year after he began working at Evergreen. Just glimpses at first. A flash of white at the end of a hallway. A reflection in a window that shouldn't have been there. He thought he was losing his mind. Years of trauma finally taking their toll. But then he saw her take something from a student's bag. That little charm bracelet that would later end up wrapped around a crude doll. That night, Mike wrote, I had a dream. I was back in high school, but everything was wrong, twisted, and there was the girl, standing in front of me. She held out the bracelet and a doll. Make it right, she said. Make them pay. Mike's hands shook as he woke up, he wrote, because there on his bedside table were the bracelet and the doll. What followed was a descent into madness. Mike began crafting dolls, using items the girl, X, would steal from students. With each doll, someone would get hurt. Emma's stomach pain, Jason's fall down the stairs. It was all Mike. All because of those dolls. And God help me, Jake, the letter read. Part of me enjoyed it, enjoyed making them suffer like I had, like you all had made me suffer. But as Mike wrote, none of it was real. The girl, the dolls, it was all him. His psychiatrist diagnosed him with dissociative identity disorder. He had created X as a way to cope with his trauma, to do the things he was too afraid to do himself. I'm getting help now, the letter concluded. But Jake, I need you to know, I'm sorry for everything I did, and I'm scared. Because sometimes late at night I still see her, standing in the corner of my room, waiting, and I can't help but wonder, what if she was real all along? That was the last I heard from Mike. I tried to visit him at Pinewood, but they told me he'd been transferred. No forwarding address. For weeks after reading that letter, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. X, the girl in the white dress. Was she real? A ghost born from the pain we'd caused? Or just a figment of Mike's troubled mind? I didn't know, but I had to find out. Last week I drove back to Evergreen. The school looked the same as it had all those years ago. As I sat in my car across the street, memories flooded back. The laughter, the classes, the cruelty. All the moments that shaped us for better or worse. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the school grounds, I saw movement by the front doors. My heart stopped. Long dark hair, pale skin, white dress, but that wasn't what made my blood run cold. Draped around her neck, fluttering slightly in the evening breeze, was a light blue scarf. Abby's scarf, the one Grandma had knitted, the one Abby said she had left at my place. She turned and looked right at me and smiled. In that moment, I understood the true weight of our actions. The ripples of pain we'd sent out into the world had come back as a tidal wave of guilt and fear. And now, that tidal wave was threatening to swallow not just me, but my sister too. I drove home that night with my hands shaking on the wheel, the weight of the past pressing down on me. Because now I know, the shadows of our guilt don't just haunt our victims, they come for us too. And they'll use whatever, or whoever they can to make us pay. When I got home, the phone rang. I was horrified to see that it was Abby's number. Abby?
It wasn't your fault. Where is my body? Hello. I'm here. Really? Are you sure?
We've just witnessed a tale of remorse, where the sins of yesterday become the specters of today. Jake Simmons has learned that in the school of life, some lessons are taught not by teachers, but by the ghosts we create. Class dismissed. Subscribe to Bedtime Shadows so you don't miss next week's enchanting chapter. The new girl in school, the one who wants your company. We hope you enjoyed this chapter. If you want to support us, see the options below. You can buy me a coffee or become a Patreon supporter. If you join the channel and become a member, you'll get access to unreleased videos, as do Patreon members.